Hey everyone, welcome to episode 113 of Tuesdays with Perry. Gonna get Perry on the line in just a second. Tonight we're gonna be talking about $2 billion taken away from Harvard unless they bow to Trump's will. And then we got Joe Biden coming out of retirement and speaking about colored kids and talking about Social Security. We're also going to talk about the continued strikes on Houthi rebels and that we got a new ambassador, new Yemeni ambassador. We're going to talk about that as well. And Bukele's visit to the White House. So let's see if we can't get Perry on the line. Perry, are you there?
Rudy!
Hey, man, how's it going?
Oh, you know what? There was an old beer commercial 40 years ago called Old Milwaukee. It don't get any better than this, brother.
How's the weather down there?
You know, my wife and I are down in the Keys on business again, and I have my dear friends here in Isle Morada that are kind enough to let us use their home. And I hate having to do any work at all because the days are in the low 80s, 50 to 60% humidity, high pressure, calm seas. I mean, even Californians are jealous of us Floridians now.
It sounds wonderful. I wish I were there, although the springtime in New England is starting to get nice. Let's start out with some breaking news. Letitia James apparently has committed fraud. It could be...
Rudy, I know you're still there, but you cut out, and I haven't heard you come back since you said, let's start out.
Hello?
That's the last thing I heard from you.
Hear me now?
Now I can hear you again.
Okay. Letitia James apparently is going to be implicated in fraud charges, mortgage fraud and tax fraud. Apparently she bought a house with a relative, listed it as her primary residence, which it is not, because then she couldn't be AG of New York City. So what's your take on this? It's breaking right now.
Well, you know, she's only the first of many dominoes in the Democrat Party that are going to start to fall. Now, everybody needs to keep their powder dry because this is not going to happen before the end of the week. It's not even going to happen before the end of the month. This was from the FHA, who oversaw these two mortgages that she went about in a fraudulent manner in order to receive such preferential treatment. And they now have discovered it, I'm using air quotes, and they have submitted it to the DOJ for, it's not prosecution, but the term that they use is a legal one, for a criminal, the exact term is criminal referral. So there is already enough evidence on Tish James between lying about her primary residence being in, as you just stated, in the state of Virginia. You can't make that your primary residence if you want to be Attorney General of the state of New York. And then she has a second property that in order to qualify for that mortgage, she would have to make sure there were less than 4 living units. Well, this one has 5. And so she lied about that. And the third thing she lied about was that the gentleman whose name she used as her spouse on the legal application happens to be her father.
No.
So as Ricky Ricardo used to say to Lucy, you have a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. What do you
And
what do you think is going to be the outcome? Pam Bondi and the Justice Department are probably going to go after her, rightly so, after she went after Trump, and is actually still going after Trump, filing another lawsuit just 2 weeks ago.
yeah, look, that's how the media is going to portray this. But as I've said to you several times over the years, both on and off mic, Pam Bondi is a law and order kind of gal. She is the attorney version of Dan Bongino. And Bongino is law enforcement, and she is justice. And I will tell you, as a resident of the state of Florida who was so fortunate to have her as Attorney General for the state over 8 years, that this James might as well now start getting ready for those measurements on that orange jumpsuit, unless she can cut a plea of some kind so that she gets off lighter. But yeah, she's in trouble. She wouldn't be the first Democrat to go to jail.
Right.
And that's something that needs to be said.
First and foremost, she would no longer be the Attorney General of New York. She wouldn't be.
That's
that would
correct.
be the first.
I lost you again there, Rudy, but I heard you say she could no longer be the Attorney General of New York. Not only could she no longer be the Attorney General of New York, she would have to surrender her law license.
Right. She'd be effectively disbarred.
Still don't hear you, bro.
You don't hear me? How about now?
I got nothing on my side. So until I hear you come back, I'll just further that point. I think this is a large reason as to why she went after Trump and continues to go after Trump as hard as she has and is doing, because she's got no other choice. Her days are numbered. It's only a question of when. I don't know when that'll be, but it ain't going to be years from now. That I can promise you. Right.
Her suits. So, could you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah. Her suits will be more than likely. This is going to damage any suits that she filed recently. Let's move on to some other breaking news recently. Did you watch Joe Biden today? He came out of retirement and he pulled the same old Sleepy Joe, where he's whispering and he could barely get out a sentence, and he called black children colored kids. It was the same old Joe, and he started referring to people that didn't seem to even be there. It was very, very strange to see that again. I don't think people want to see it.
Well, not only do the average Joe schmoes like us don't want to see it, but if you look at all the talking heads that were privy to that, I don't even know what you want to call it. It made, because all I could think about was 7 months ago, this was the president of the United States, and he's only gotten worse, which of course that's not a surprise. It's the thing that I took away from all the Democrats was it was even obviously worse for them, and they're begging him just go away, and you know he's not going to go away. They're going to have to prevent anyone who's willing to pay him $100,000 talking engagement fee. They're going to have to pay people to not pay him to speak in front of their groups, because he's got a lot to say, and a lot of it has to do with, basically a tu brute. He's trying to reach for one of the 24 daggers that are in his political back right now from all the, starting with Princess Pelosi.
Yeah.
And he is a very vindictive person. And so he's going to do everything he can to see to it that he humiliates as many in his party as he can. And yeah, the vast majority of the speech that I watched had to do with how he, you know, as I expected him to do sooner or later, come out and say that this new administration is destroying the country. I fully expected that. The thing is, as I've said repeatedly over the past 2 months, that dog don't hunt anymore, because people are seeing that, you know what? Things are improving. Things are starting to turn around. No, I don't really feel it. Talking about the average Joe Schmo, I don't really feel it in my pocket anymore. But one thing for sure, it ain't getting worse.
Right. It's
you know,
there have been a lot.
Where 3 years ago I had to listen to Janet Yellen and Uncle Joe tell me that inflation was transitory, as everything in my world was falling apart, and now it's coming back around. And my only concern is, will the Republican Party stay the course? Right. That's my concern.
I believe they are. I mean, all the indicators now are good economic indicators, jobs up, inflation down. We had good dip in the mortgage rates. And so those are fundamentals, foundational aspects of the economy that are pointing us in the right direction. The stock market doesn't mean anything in the long run. I mean, the stock market goes up, it goes down, but it's not.
Well, you also have to look at, you know, let's be fair here, okay? Because the stock market is an indicator, but of 6 months out from now. The fact of the matter is, it's very nervous right now, because they don't know where the tariffs are going to be in even 30 days from now. What they are seeing, and one of the reasons why the stock market has gained back some of its huge losses it took last month, is because 130 nations are now coming to the table, want to negotiate in good faith with the Trump administration for truly fair trade. And that takes time to accomplish. And so the stock market is seeing this. So now they know the most important thing, and that is people want to negotiate with the United States, and Trump has successfully isolated China. And the Chinese are in trouble, economically speaking. So when you look at what's going on right now, this up and down, and as you said, that's not an indicator. The indicator is, where is it going over the course of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Because that does indicate whether they are bulls or bears on Wall Street. And right now, they are, I forget which big trading house it was. I don't know if it was Bear Stearns, but they made a public announcement that they're very bullish on the economy. And when you look at, now we're closing in on $4 trillion worth of foreign investment that is coming in. That's money. Those are American dollars, whether digital dollars or physical dollars, that are being brought back and reinvested in our country. While at the same time, and I am not a proponent of this, I don't like the fact that Trump is taking steps to deliberately weaken the dollar. But why is he doing that? He is doing that to increase growth of investment from foreign capitalists bringing their dollars and repatriating them in the United States. And that's the reason for lowering the value of the dollar. That's a gambit. It's not one I agree with. But be that as it may, everything that Trump is doing, especially on the economic and on the foreign policy fronts, have been spot on. And it's been nothing but roses. So who am I to judge a man who has already proven his policies work once before, and they are already bearing fruit now for a second time?
Yeah.
Let him finish the job.
Yeah, I think we had to uncouple with China no matter what. So, however he does that, I agree with it. What do you think? You think there's going to be a full out war? How do you think China is going to respond? You think they're going to go after Taiwan? Because they made some rambling statement about Hong Kong today that was ill received because it didn't make any sense. I mean, where was the United States backing a democracy movement in Hong Kong? Maybe, but it wasn't supposed to be part of the communist regime yet anyway. And they kind of walked in there after COVID. How do you think China is going to respond in the long term? You think there's going to be action against Taiwan or?
There's no question that they're going to make some kind of move on Taiwan. What they are looking at is multifold. First off, how badly do they want to take that island? That's number one. Number two, are they willing to embrace the repercussions of it? Meaning, it won't just be the United States that, at the very least, cuts all ties, not just economic, but asks their ambassador to the United States to leave. It wouldn't be just the United States. It would be the European Union. It would be a lot of Asia. Because what happens to Taiwan can happen to them. You know, the Vietnamese have no love for the Chinese. Yes, without the Chinese, they could have never captured South Vietnam and pushed us out of that part of Asia. But the Chinese, just like every colonial power before the Chinese, stepped, and I'm talking about historically, going back 200-300 years, maybe longer, have always stepped all over the Vietnamese people. Talk to a Vietnamese person who's 50 years old or older, and will tell you what it was like for their family living under the thumb of a Western colonist like France, or even the United States during the Vietnam era, or under China after the Vietnam era. So they have no love, and they know that if the United States does not dissuade the communist Chinese from taking over free China, they will be the next on the chopping block. So the Chinese have to weigh these things. And they have made it very clear. They've circled calendar year 2027 as the year they take Taiwan back. Now, where does that put us? Now, as far as economically, what we have to worry about, cutting off trade policy with the Chinese, and we are decoupling as you and I speak tonight, but decoupling our economies, or our economy, from theirs, we have to understand we're putting them further and further into a box. And as I said during our show last week, history is the best teacher. And if you go back 100 years ago, not quite, but 90, 95 years ago, it was the actions of the United States government, specifically during the Great Depression under FDR, Japan. Japan is a very poor country for resources. They have to import everything, including rubber, to make tires for their vehicles. Well, at that time, and I will only digress this far, at that time, we're talking about the early to mid 30s, Firestone went to the FDR administration and said, you got to do something about the Japanese. They're offering more money for rubber than we can afford in order to continue to make tires for for vehicles. We were in a Great Depression. It was really important to keep whatever assembly lines were open. And if the cost of rubber would become prohibitive, there goes any chance of coming out of the Depression. So what did FDR do? He put pressure on the Indonesian government and said, we want all your rubber. The Japanese came to us through their ambassador and explained, look, we understand we're fighting over the same natural resources, but you can't cut us off. And we basically told them to go pound sand. That's when they had to make the decision to further their imperial goals of building a first-rate navy that even the United States would not be able to defeat. And they started building up their military, and as every American knows, we all know what happened on December 7th, 1941. That's what I worry about with further isolating the most India is the most populous nation in the world, but the second most populous nation in the world. Xi has to keep those factories running.
Yep.
If he doesn't, it's going to be the end of his rule, because even the poorest peasants in China now have full bellies. And if they can't get full bellies anymore, well, then they got nothing to live for. And the Chinese Politburo knows it.
What do you think of the comment that I don't think it was Xi, but it was one of the other Chinese communist delegation that said the U.S. peasants will be very unhappy if you keep up this trade war. And I just want your answer on that, but also I want to interject here too. Maybe if Trump knows that China is looking to take over Taiwan in 2027, maybe the weakening has to start now.
Oh, there's no question about that. There's no question about that. And also, as you have so well educated all of us in your audience about fifth generation warfare, the Chinese, and that's what we have to be careful of. I forget what, it wasn't U.S. cyber control, but it was one of the main branches, whether it was intelligence or technology. They said last week, the Chinese have successfully infiltrated our grid.
Oh, yeah.
Which means what? If we go to war, even if we don't go to war, if we push them to the brink, all of a sudden, every city in this country goes dark.
Lights out, yep.
Lights out. And then what do we do to respond? And so...
Light a candle.
Yeah, well, we're going to be lighting big candles.
Yeah. I think people have to understand that the serious predicament we're in, there's no other way to get out of it than to punch out of the paper bag. We could spend all day talking about the predicament with China.
Right.
So why don't we leave that there for a moment, and let's jump over to Harvard. We'll talk a little bit about Harvard and Bukele in El Salvador, talking about this Maryland man who was actually a legal alien, MS-13 gang member, that was deported to his home country of El Salvador. He was Salvadoran and put in the prison there. But a lot of this also surrounds what's happening at Harvard. Their $2 billion of federal funding is on pause. What do you think that's all about?
Well, look, Harvard today is not the Harvard that we grew up truly admiring. Harvard today no longer insists that every prospective student who wants in be tested. They no longer, I just saw it on Fox News today. they no longer insist on the SATs or ACTs. They consider them racist. And so what does that tell you about the once vaunted Harvard University? It is not what it once was. It is being ruled by a bunch of socialists who, again, as I've always said, based on what is taking place in Cambridge, Massachusetts over the past 3 years, they hate this country. They hate everything it stands for. And this is, it's not a last ditch gasp because, as Fox mentioned over and over and over again today, they have $53 billion in assets. Liquid assets, not hard assets, liquid assets. They don't need the $2 billion that people like you and I, as American citizens, have agreed to give them for research. My argument is if the research is that damn important and you think DEI and Semitism is an idea of free, well, then you don't need my dollars for your research. You got $53 billion. Use your own damn money. And that's what this is really going to boil down to. I find it really interesting because I had this conversation on your show a few weeks ago about, 15, 20 years ago, I had this conversation with my one of my local board of education commissioners, board members. And I was opposed to them following all the federal regulations that stated you have to mainstream this one, and you have to feed this food, and you have to do this, and you have to do that in order to get federal dollars. The federal dollars that go to educate, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, that go to educate every student in my county at that time was a fraction of the total cost, the total investment that both local and state dollars made. At that time, it was almost $7,000 a student for our annual budget. And only $300 came from the federal government. So my argument to my Board of Education director was, tell the federal government to keep their money, and now we don't have to do all these things. And she said, Perry, if it were that simple, we would do it. I can't, because they will tie us up in court forever. So if Harvard wants to fight this out in court, Lord knows they turn out enough attorneys, bring it on.
Yeah.
But as an American, I don't want any of my money going to your hateful school. And it really is just that simple. And that is exactly what Trump is doing. He's saying, okay, if you're not going to abide by law as written, executive orders I have signed, then I can't shut you down. I don't want to shut you down, but I'm not going to give you money anymore. So if the money's not that important to you, Harvard, shut your damn pie hole, go take some money out of your deep pockets and fund whatever research you're currently doing with my dollars.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, will it happen? I don't know, because we see how the district courts are behaving. And, again, I think this is a fight that Roberts does not want brought to his courtroom. And if it is, there's no guarantee you're going to get 5 or 6 members of SCOTUS to rule in favor of the Department of Education on this. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Right.
But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be appropriated anymore.
Yeah. Congress could act on it for sure.
That's right.
Harvard will definitely bring the lawsuit to get their money. They're greedy motherfuckers. So I don't imagine that there'll come a time where Harvard won't sue the federal government for billions of dollars. I'm sure they will. So let's move into this. This is a great story that this Maryland man, who is supposedly
Air quotes.
supposedly MS-13. So Von, I guess there was a rally down there for this guy, and Maryland Senator Von Holland was down there. He's going to go down to El Salvador and ask Bukele to get this guy back. I don't think that's going to work. We don't have any jurisdiction anymore. The guy is back in El Salvador, and now he's in a prison. So I don't think he's going to be coming back. But could you believe the left talking about this guy that he's a Maryland man? He really isn't a Maryland man. He is an El Salvadoran national. So even if and apparently he just married his wife just the other day after his arrest or after inquiry into his background. So he doesn't have legal, the ability to stay here legally. Just because he fathered children doesn't give him the right to be here. And since he came into the country illegally, the deportation is not even an issue.
First off, you forgot to mention how not one, but two federal judges looked at all the evidence that was put in front of them. And both of them concurred that this man did not have legal right to stay in this country. Then you have to jump to the Supreme Court's ruling, which I didn't think it was 9-0, but they said twice today on the news that they ruled 9-0 in favor of the policy that Trump is enforcing. They simply said, you didn't do it the right way. And when you couple that with the fact that, as I've already said, not one, but two federal judges had ruled that this man needed to be deported. Add to that, as you so correctly stated, he is an El Salvadoran. He is an El Salvadoran national. So Bukele has legal jurisdiction over this man because he was a criminal in that country. And so while Bukele is taking one gang member from MS-13 off our hands, the fact of the matter is he's making sure that that MS-13 gang member is under lock and key in the country he belongs in. And so I just love how, all the talking heads from the other side are like, Bukele doesn't have the legal authority. He doesn't, blah, blah, blah. Okay. As you said, he's not a Maryland man. He's an illegal alien, illegally in the state of Maryland, and happened to father two children with an American citizen. And as I said to my wife while we were watching Special Report this evening, hey, I don't want to see your tears, baby. You decided to have children with a gang, well, I can't call him a gangbanger. You decided to have children with a gang member from MS-13. That was your decision. Now here's another decision for you. Don't ask me, as an American citizen who believes in law and order, to feel sorry for you because you and your children that he fathered can't see daddy anymore. They can find a way to see daddy. Just pack your things and either visit him or move to El Salvador. It's that simple. There is no reason why this individual who invaded our country should be allowed to remain in our country, especially because he's a gang member. Not limited to the fact he's a gang member. I don't care if you're a gang member. I don't care if you're a 3-year-old child that's dragged across the Rio Grande. The fact of the matter is you are not an immigrant. You are not a undocumented immigrant. You are an illegal alien. You invaded my country. You came here without permission from my government, and that means you go back.
You're out. Yeah. That's
you're
what
out.
the argument about whether he's a gang member or not is like a moot point, because it doesn't matter.
That's right.
It doesn't matter. He came here illegally, and so he's removed back to his home country. Very good.
And I'm going to go one step further when it comes to Van Hollen. You care more about this criminal than you do about a family that are voters in your own state. You want to stand side by side with this young woman who decided to build a life with a criminal, but yet you pay no homage whatsoever to the family who lost one of their own to another. I don't know if it was MS-13 or not. I believe it was.
Yep.
Another gang member who your president allowed into this country and your state government released back into society. So, you know what, Chris? Please go down to El Salvador, because whoever runs against you in your next election is going to have plenty of material to run on TV.
Yeah.
In Maryland, when it comes time for you to answer the voters of your own state, that you care more about illegal aliens, who many of whom are criminals, than you care the people who are living, all the dying, and all the tax paying, so that you can live the high life down in Washington, D.C. You go right ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that plays out.
And if you're worried about keeping families together, like Tom Homan said, we're not separating families. They could go with the deportee. So you could go back to El Salvador.
And they can come back home anytime they want. They're American citizens.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, we got about 5 minutes left, and I know you wanted to get into Yemen. The United States airstrikes continue on Houthi rebels. And then we have an appointment of a new U.S. friendly Yemeni ambassador to the U.S. and what this means for U.S. strategy in the Middle East. If people didn't know what's going on in Yemen, there is a government there that is Sunni Muslim, and the Houthi rebels, Houthi is a tribe, and the Houthi rebels are Shia, and they're backed by Iran. And so there's a civil war going on in Yemen.
For years.
Yeah, which looks over, and we've been funding the Saudi Arabians, who have been funding the Yemeni government, and then Iran has been funding the Houthi rebels, who are now have taken to threatening shipping lanes there in the Gulf of Aden, I think.
And Red Sea.
And Red Sea, right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Yemen?
Well, this particular individual is a Western-educated businessman, you know, obviously native-born of Yemen. And what most Americans don't see in Yemen is exactly as you just described. There's a civil war that's going on. You laid it out perfectly. But the government is Western-friendly, and specifically to the United States. This particular ambassador has ties to a lot of powerful Americans. He has been largely responsible over the years for bringing certain industries and some kinds of trade from the United States to Yemen. And by their president appointing him, it sends a message not only to the United States that Yemen wants to have closer ties with Washington, but most importantly, the amount of intelligence that is going to be shared now, because now you have a Western-educated Yemeni who is going to be largely responsible for passing information that is going to be vital to not only his country, But to the west, it's simply ending all the piracy that's going on, but more importantly, restoring law and order to the Yemeni people. And so, again, just like everything else Trump is doing, it ain't going to happen overnight. But this is a big deal. It's not a big deal to the average American. But when it comes to foreign policy and the foreign policy of this particular American government, it's going to be a big deal in the months ahead. That I can assure you. It could mean actually putting this civil war to end once and for all, because, as you stated, the rebels are aligned with Iran. And right now, Iran is at its weakest point in many, many years, both militarily and, as the days go by, economically. And like China, they are being cornered in their own part of the world. And so there isn't the ability to help these pirates and to help these rebels like there once was. So this is why this particular situation in Yemen is very important.
So I looked up this guy. Is it Stephen Fagan or Fagan?
No. He's an American.
Yeah. This new guy.
He was there for the swearing in ceremony.
Okay, so this was the new guy is Rashad Al-Alimi. Is that correct?
Alini, yes. I think that's how I pronounced it when I read it.
Okay. So I'm looking at the news story here, because the other guy served. Fagan served since 2022, so this is a new guy. But I just wanted to try to get the name out there. So we'll see what happens there. Iran is in a weak position. I really think they should come to the table. They had banned direct talks with the United States for many years now. So that's why.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then how come Jew boy Steve Witkoff was talking to their foreign minister last week?
They were having direct talks. But
right.
it was just propaganda that Iran was saying they're indirect talks because we banned direct talks with the United States, but they have to take direct talks because the threat of military retaliation, and Russia can't really do anything about it because they got their own shit to worry about in Ukraine. And so Iran is sort of cut off. And we'll see what happens with that. They're not building nuclear weapons just yet, but they are enriching uranium, which is obviously a problem. And the thing in Yemen has to stop. But, a diplomatic solution. I mean, you have Shia in Yemen. I mean, everybody wants a voice, right? So it's the same thing with the Kurds, which is funny. I don't know. This is kind of like a side note, but the PPK in Turkey agreed to lay down their arms in their long-time insurgency in Turkey. What do you think of a Kurdish state?
Man, I wish it could come to being. I'm not convinced it will. If because you have to keep in mind, who is it that's running Turkey?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he's Western educated, but Erdogan is no friend of the West.
Yeah.
And so if I think the best they could ever hope for is maybe some form of autonomy like the Israelis tried with the Palestinians, and we see how well that went. So, I really hope the Kurds are finally given their own piece of land, because no matter, they're like the Jewish people, wherever they went, they were treated like crap. And so they can only depend on each other for their own safety. And they are vicious fighters. I mean, it's one of the things for our country in that part of the world is having them as allies. But I keep in mind, they've got 2,000 Al-Qaeda that they are keeping in prison. We're paying them to keep in prison. So
we're playing both sides of that. We'll see. Maybe this could be a good opportunity to slice some of Syria and slice some of Iraq, but we'll have to see how that pans out. Maybe that's why the truce with Turkey, with the PPK, because Turkey has troops in northern Syria, so they might have to catch a deal with that. But that's a little digression there. We're going to leave it there for tonight. Any last words?
Well, we didn't get to our girlfriend, Jasmine Crockett, so I'll save that for next week.
And that's what we said last time.
I know. It's a tease.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't even talk about her. I don't think they should have captions translating her Ebonics when she speaks in the chamber. All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll catch Jasmine Crockett. We'll have our list of baddies. We could put Letitia James and Fonnie Willis, Jasmine Crockett, and whoever else we could scoop up and put it on the bad list. We'll see what happens with Letitia James. I say she goes down.
Yes. Eventually, I think she does. But like I said, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Little steps. Baby
Alrighty,
steps.
my friend.
All right.
Baby steps. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. One foot in front of the other.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
I'm looking forward to it. Take care now.
All right. See you, man.
Bye-bye.
All right. There goes Perry. Episode 113 of Tuesdays with Perry. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live streamed on Rumble for my daily podcast, Rudy's Revelation. Or join us next week for episode 114 of Tuesdays with Perry. We'll see you. Peace out.